There are two camps with the NFL Combine. There's the first camp that says it's the underwear Olympics, it doesn't matter at all, and why the hell are we talking about this? And there's the second camp that goes, oh, okay, this player just ran the fastest 40-yard dash that we've ever seen. Is he a top 3 wide receiver in this? We have to pump the brakes. Well, of course, you can't find yourself in a position where you are looking at everything with a black and white lens, where it's all or nothing. Like everything, it's a gray area. The NFL Combine for sure matters when we evaluate these prospects, but primarily it's to hit minimum thresholds. That way we know they're athletic enough, they're big enough to work out at the NFL level. It's not the faster guy is inherently the better guy. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the running backs and wide receivers that did not hit minimum thresholds that is going to severely cap the overall upside that they have at the NFL level. Now, first thing I want to do is I want to start over at the running back position, because running back is a position where, honestly, athleticism matters so much more than wide receiver. Wide receiver, a lot of it's going to come down to technique. A lot of it's going to come down to what you can do with your routes, what you can do after the catch. Where running back's like, all right, you got to hit a hole, maybe make a man miss, and run fast as hell and be big enough to handle a 3-down workload. So a big thing that I want to look at is going to be the minimum thresholds that we have for key metrics. The first thing is going to be the weight for running backs. And for this study, we covered all this in an in-depth video last week, but just to fill you in, what we did is we looked at every top 12 running back finisher essentially over the past 15 years in fantasy football. So, I mean, if you've been a good running back, you're pretty much on this list over the past 15 years. And we tracked their key numbers from their NFL combines, such as their weight, their 40-yard dash, their 3-cone, their shuttle, their vertical, their broad jump, the whole 9 yards. And starting off with their weight, what we found is there were only 3 finishers of top 12 running backs for the past 15 years that weighed fewer than 190 pounds. These guys were Devon Achane and Darren Sproles did it twice. So typically, if you're not over 190 pounds, what we find is you're not able to go through and handle a 3-down workload at the next level. Now, I understand your argument. Well, Mason, these guys are going to put on weight. Well, Mason, these guys are going to get more muscle. I get it. And yes, these are young kids, and they, of course, will continue to get bigger. But when we're comparing apples to apples and we're looking at all running backs and what they did at the NFL Combine, we assume that the guys that were too small back 10 years ago also got bigger after the Combine. But nonetheless, that 190-pound mark does seem to be like it's a pretty big deal. We'll talk about this in just one second. And then going over to what we saw with the 40-yard dash, you really want to be about faster than a 4.60. I mean, if you're slower than a 4.60, it's not the end of the world as long as you're pretty damn close. And if you are right there at 4.60, 4.61, 4.62, what we typically need to see is we need to see you be a big-bodied running back. We can't have you be slow and small. There's only one running back that's been great doing that. We'll talk about him in a second. And then going over to the vertical actually didn't really matter much at running back. I mean, just jump higher than 29 inches. The broad jump didn't really matter either, jump further than 9 feet. I mean, the 3-cone, actually a pretty big deal. You got to run faster than a 7.3 3-cone. But looking at these minimum thresholds at the running back position and seeing these low bars that you just have to cross, right? That way we can make sure that you have that upside at the next level to potentially be a running back 1 in fantasy. That's a top 12 guy. I understand maybe you want to say, well, Mason, I just want a running back 3. Shouldn't be drafting someone who has the upside of a running back 3. Draft them with the upside of a running back 1. And if they turn out to be a running back 3, then that's fine. Looking at these minimum thresholds, the first running back that I noticed that did not hit it was actually Bucky Irving. This is a running back that came in and weighed 192 pounds at the NFL Combine. The only running back ones that we've seen previous to Irving were Darren Sproles as well as Devon Achane. What both those running backs had in common, especially with Achane this past year, obviously top-end athletes. Devon Achane ran a 4.32 40-yard dash. So we can say, okay, yeah, he's small, but at the same time, if you're looking at what he does with his athletic testing, he's absolutely off the charts. We didn't really get to see that with Bucky Irving. I mean, we didn't get to see him really do anything. He ran a 4.55, which is fine if you're a big-bodied running back, but if you're this small, it's not getting the job done. I mean, he couldn't really jump either. He had a vertical of 29.5 inches. So this is someone that is plummeting down my rankings. And I mean, if you look these historical thresholds, he probably doesn't have the upside to be a top 12 RB. Now, going over to two running backs that kind of fit a similar mold. They don't have issues with their sizes, and this is something that may end up saving them. Dylan Johnson and Audric Estime, extremely slow. Now, I would honestly ignore Kareem Hunt with this data. I don't think this Kareem Hunt number is true. There's no way it is. Estime comes out, pretty much post a slower 40-yard dash time than we have ever seen from a running back that was an RB1 over the past 15 years. He runs a 4.71 40-yard dash, which pretty much means he's not going to be the guy. Yes, like I said, please ignore Kareem Hunt with this data. And then Dylan Johnson ran a 4.68. Now, I mean, we have seen another running back that was slow and ended up being great. Arian Foster ran a 4.69 40-yard dash, and Arian Foster was phenomenal. Now, should we look at that one example and should we go, okay, yeah, this one outlier is enough to throw out 15 years of data and assume that we can find the next? Probably not, right? Now, what these running backs do have to save them a bit is these are running backs that were massive. Estime, 221 pounds. Dylan Johnson, 217. So maybe you can say, well, because they are bigger bodied running backs, at least in the case of Estime, he gets a little bit of wiggle room with this 40-yard dash time, but still, he's an outlier. I'm not chasing an outlier unless you have a really strong reason to. I don't think he has the ceiling. Now, going over to our next position, we'll talk about wide receivers. Let's just briefly cross over what we needed to see from wide receivers. Over the past 15 years, we've seen 0 wide receiver ones weigh less than 180 pounds at the NFL Combine. We've seen only 1 wide receiver run slower than a 4.70, and that was Jarvis Landry. We've only seen 1 wide receiver jump fewer than 30 inches. That's Jarvis Landry. I know a lot of y'all were making fun of Jarvis in our last video. We had only 7 wide receivers have a broad jump that was less than 9 feet. The shuttle, you got to run faster than a 4.5. The 3-cone, you got to run faster than a 7.3. But a big thing that I want to go over to, and this is something that I don't know if we can ignore the historical data from, but I am definitely questioning it, is going to be the weight of these wide receivers. Like we said, we have never seen a wide receiver less than 180 pounds turn into a top 12 wide receiver from a points per game perspective. Just because it has never happened does not mean it will never happen, because there are 2 outliers recently. Devonta Smith, Tank Dell. I was drafting Devonta Smith just because the film and the production was absurd. Smith was like the best collegiate wide receiver we've ever seen. So I was like, okay, we'll ignore the size concerns with Devonta Smith. Tank Dell, I was not drafting, however, because Tank Dell weighed 165 pounds. Devonta Smith weighed 170. So it is interesting. And this is something that we talked about at the very beginning of the offseason, in that while these weight numbers for sure are concerning when you're looking at Xavier Worthy and Troy Franklin, the NFL is changing where these defensive backs can't be nearly as physical with these wide receivers. It's not nearly as important to try to win at the catch point. And rather at the NFL level, how you're winning now is by generating separation with your routes, by creating yards after the catch. And you're not having to be the Brandon Marshall from back in the day, right? Xavier Worthy did weigh 165 pounds. Obviously, hook 'em horns. You know I love my guy. The man was a monster with the 4.21. Troy Franklin, 176 pounds. I just updated my rankings over on flogfantasy.com. I currently have Xavier Worthy, Troy Franklin, and Adonai Mitchell all in the same tier. And I'm sitting here really debating this because I am a little bit concerned. I don't want to just throw this out the window. I don't want to act like, okay, Tank Dell was a wide receiver too, so that means we can ignore the data for the past 15 seasons. Like I said, I don't think we need to be for sure listening to it, but I want to be considering it. I don't know if I want to move Adonai Mitchell ahead of Troy Franklin, with Adonai Mitchell just absolutely crushing the combine, but Troy Franklin's production profile is just so much better. If you're looking at their yards per route run, their yards per team pass attempt, their targets per route run. So it is going to be something I'm thinking about a ton. By the time you're watching this video, I'll probably have already tinkered with my rankings more on flogfantasy.com. So of course, if you want our most up-to-date rankings, you can find those on flogfantasy.com. Code FLOG will get you 30% off any subscription. Plus, yours truly will break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team, come up with an exact plan for what you can do in your rookie draft this season. And also, you can find our Dynasty Trade Calculator there, our Dynasty Trade Finder, all the premium content and rankings from everybody you watch on YouTube. So yeah, make sure you take advantage of that with code FLOCK. But going over to our next wide receiver, I want to be very transparent here. This is not that much of a concern for me, and I want to address it out the gate. Keon Coleman runs a 4.61. This is not good for a wide receiver that was sold to be some freak athletic beast, right? That's what we were told that he was going to be. We were told that Keon Coleman, while he didn't have the production profile at Florida State, just to kind of overlook it because he was going to go to the NFL Combine, he's going to put up monstrous numbers, and he was going to go round one of the NFL draft. Well, the man runs a 4.61 40. Not good. Now, unlike the weight, unlike what we saw previously at running back, where we are showing those hard thresholds and we were saying you can only point to like one outlier example here that ended up working out. And if you can only point to one outlier example, I can say it's pretty good as a rule overall. A 4.61 is not the end of the world. Not at all at wide receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown ran a 4.61. Cooper Kupp ran a 4.62. Hakeem Nicks, 4.63. Austin Collie, 4.63. Brandon Lloyd, 4.63. Terrell Owens, 4.65. Wes Welker, 4.65, and the Turtle, Jarvis Landry, 4.77. So we have a decent sample of wide receivers that were able to be wide receiver ones in fantasy despite posting this slow time at their respective NFL combines. Now, with that being said, I understand that this list looks extensive, but keep in mind, this is, all top 12 wide receivers for the past 15 seasons. So, we're looking at a list with well over 100 players on it, and we have about 10 guys that were this slow. So, Keon Coleman's not off my draft board. I did move him down slightly. I moved him behind Xavier Worthy. I believe we had him neck and neck with Worthy. Maybe we had Adonai Mitchell behind him as well. I think you have to have Mitchell ahead of Coleman. I think you have to have Xavier over Coleman as well. I wasn't a big Keon Coleman guy before the combine, but I don't necessarily think because he runs a 4.61 that all of a sudden he's undraftable. Like I would say with Estime at running back, right? Where you run a 4.71 at running back. That's like, okay, get you off my board entirely. If you come in, you're Bucky Irving, you weigh 192 pounds, get off my board entirely. But Keon Coleman maybe takes a slight hit, but he still has a shot. But I think that's all I have for y'all. Again, I want to reiterate, the combine's not everything. It's a small tool. We want to look at outliers and look at guys hitting minimum thresholds. The majority of wide receivers came out and absolutely crushed it. We're going to be diving into the winners tomorrow and the guys actually moving up rankings. So, of course, if you have not done so already, hit that like, subscribe, play Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you want to get access to all my Dynasty rankings, all my rookie rankings, if you want me to break down your Dynasty team in a podcast, all the premium content of all your favorite creators, Dynasty Trade Calculator, Dynasty Trade Finder, all on flogfantasy.com, promo code FLOG. You're going to be getting 30% off any subscription, a free week trial, and I'll break down your team. But thank you again. Really do appreciate you. And really hope we get to see you out with the video tomorrow.